I've spent the better part of 60 years on these hills, watching the seasons roll over the land like waves across an ocean. Sheep farming isn't glamorous, but it's honest. You learn the rhythm of life out here, birth and death, weather and waiting, solitude and the small, silent miracles that make it all worth it. I never intended to keep goats, not seriously anyway. Sheep were my business. But Beatrice, well, she changed that. And Sam, my border collie, my right hand for a decade, he changed too, in a way I never expected. This is their story. And mine, I suppose. It began during lambing season 7 years ago, a muddy March that left ruts in the ground and damp in my bones. That spring, I took in a pair of goats from a neighbor down the road. He was leaving the area, his wife had taken ill, and he needed someone to mind them for a while. I didn't much like goats. Too clever by half, always scheming. But I owed the man a favor. That's how Beatrice came into my life. She wasn't much to look at, just another horned, beady-eyed creature in a matted coat. Her companion died within a week of arriving, sick from something I couldn't fix. But Beatrice, she was tough. She didn't mourn. She didn't complain. She just watched. And I don't mean that in a poetic way. I'd find her near the edge of the sheep paddock, still as a stone, eyes following everything. Me, the dogs, the flock. She was learning. That much was obvious, though I didn't yet understand why. Now Sam was the kind of dog you'd write songs about if you had any sense. Black and white, wiry, lean with the focus of a soldier. We'd worked together since he was a pup. I trained him myself, and he was sharp as flint. When he was working, the world vanished for him. It was the sheep, and nothing but the sheep. The first time Beatrice tried to join in, I thought she'd lost her mind. It was early May. The lambs were starting to roam further afield, and Sam and I were pushing the flock up to higher pasture, just shy of the stone ridge at the top of the property. As always, Sam worked with fluid grace, moving low to the ground, anticipating every shift in the herd. I stood behind, crook in hand, calling out commands now and then, not that Sam needed them. Then I spotted her, Beatrice, trotting along the flanks, not causing trouble, just there. She wasn't chasing, or headbutting, or doing any of the nonsense goats are known for. No, she was moving with purpose. Eyes on the sheep. I watched, slack-jawed, as she angled her body just so, nudging a wandering ewe back toward the group. The sheep didn't panic. They didn't see her as a predator. They just moved, as if she belonged. I kept expecting her to ruin it, to get overexcited and scatter the flock. But she didn't. She held her ground, flicked her ears like she was waiting for a cue, and when Sam swept around the back of the herd, she filled in the gap like she knew the plan. Sam noticed her, of course. He froze, mid-step, unsure what to make of it. But he didn't growl or bark. He watched her for a moment, then resumed his pattern. And from that day on, she followed him. I didn't encourage it at first. It was too strange. A goat working with a dog to herd sheep? It sounded like a story you'd tell children. But Beatrice kept showing up. Every morning when I'd open the paddock gate, Sam would spring out like an arrow, and Beatrice would be 5 steps behind him. She never chased, never scattered the sheep. She watched, learned, and when she moved, she did it right. By June, I stopped trying to shoo her off. She wasn't in the way. If anything, she made the job easier. Sam worked the back and sides, and Beatrice would patrol the edges. She developed this trick of walking in an arc, head low but ears perked, and the sheep responded to her with this bizarre mixture of curiosity and caution. They didn't fear her the way they did Sam, but they respected her space. That was enough. I mentioned it to a few neighbors, and they laughed, of course. One of them, Tommy Dale, said maybe I'd gone senile, letting a goat do my dog's job. But I knew what I saw. Sam was still in charge, still the muscle and the instinct. But Beatrice was a supplement. A strange, effective supplement. By late summer, something shifted. I remember one particular day, it must have been August, hot as a branding iron. The sheep had gotten down into the stream bed that ran along the edge of my lower pasture. It was shaded and cool there, and they didn't want to leave. I tried calling Sam in, but the incline was tricky, and the brambles thick. He could go around, but it was a hassle. Beatrice didn't wait. She darted down the bank, hopping like a deer, weaving through the brush with surprising speed. She let out this odd, guttural bleat, deep and steady, and the sheep turned. They looked up. Then they started moving, not in a panic, just slowly, climbing back up the slope one by one. Sam met them at the ridge and finished the job. I stood there, stunned. A goat. A goat had just cleared the hardest part of my day. From then on, I started to see them differently, not just as a dog and a goat, but as a team. They weren't friends in the way humans are. They didn't cuddle or play. But there was a rhythm between them, an understanding. Sam would glance at her sometimes mid-task, a silent check-in. And Beatrice, for her part, never overstepped. She moved with the flock when it made sense, and hung back when it didn't. It was like she knew her role. I began building my schedule around the two of them. I trusted Sam with everything, but Beatrice added something intangible, some finesse that even a seasoned dog couldn't replicate. The sheep were calmer, the herd more cohesive. I could manage more with less effort. I didn't tell many people. It felt private in a way. Sacred, almost. A kind of magic that wasn't about spells or superstition, but about watching nature make something unexpected work. The summer passed like smoke on the wind. I found myself talking to Beatrice more, the way I'd always talked to Sam. Not baby talk, just plain words. And she listened. Her ears would twitch, her eyes would meet mine, and sometimes I'd swear she understood. Not every word, but the tone, the intent. One morning in early September, I came out to the yard and found Beatrice waiting by the barn. Sam was there too, already alert. The sky was pale with dawn, and the first frost clung to the grass. I had no reason to take the flock out early, but I looked at those two, standing side by side like soldiers awaiting orders, and I changed my plans. We moved the sheep up to the high meadow that day, through thick fog and slick rocks. It should have been a struggle. But it wasn't. It was seamless, silent, beautiful. Sam on one side, Beatrice on the other, guiding the flock with grace. That was the day I stopped thinking of her as the goat. She was Beatrice, a working partner, a part of the farm. If you'd told me 5 years earlier that I'd be praising a goat for herding sheep, I'd have laughed you out of the pub. But life has a way of humbling you, showing you that the things you think you understand are only half the picture. And in that quiet revelation, something else began to change, though I wouldn't realize it until much later. It wasn't just the animals who were working in harmony. It was me, too. That autumn was the kind that slips past you quiet as breath. Days shortened, trees turned without drama, and I found myself watching the animals more than usual. Not just the flock, but Sam and Beatrice. Watching them became a habit. Maybe even a comfort. I'd sit on the edge of the stone wall near the south pasture, thermos in hand, watching as the two of them circled and nudged and waited, doing the work of 3 dogs without fanfare. It's a strange thing when you realize you've been given something rare. Most farmers know their animals, sure. You learn their moods, their quirks. But this, what I had with Sam and Beatrice, was different. It was deeper than training. Deeper than obedience. It was trust. Mutual, unspoken trust. The word started to spread, whether I liked it or not. I think it was Martha who first mentioned it at the feed co-op in town. Said she'd heard from Claire, who'd heard from Tommy Dale's cousin, that I had a goat dog. That's what they were calling her. Goat dog. I didn't care for it. Sounded like a joke. But people started stopping by. Just to see. I never turned them away, but I never made a show of it either. If you came early enough and kept your voice down, you might catch a glimpse of Sam and Beatrice at work. A few of the younger lads, those who'd taken up small hobby farms, asked if I thought it was something that could be taught. I told them the truth. No. Beatrice hadn't been trained, not by me, anyway. She learned by watching. And Sam allowed her. That was the key. There was no jealousy in him. No challenge. He just let her in. And that, to me, was the miracle. Late October brought rain, heavy, steady, unforgiving. The kind that seeps into everything. You can't stop farming because of weather. You just get wet. The low fields flooded in patches, and the high ground became slick with mud. That's when I noticed Beatrice was slipping more. Her hooves weren't made for that sort of ground. She still tried, still showed up every morning by the gate, but she was slower. One morning, after a long haul moving the flock from the orchard to the dry paddock near the woods, I saw her favoring her right foreleg. Not badly, but enough that Sam noticed. He stopped mid-drive, circled back to her, gave her a little bump with his nose. It wasn't affection exactly, more like concern. Then he took over the last stretch himself, flanking wider than usual to cover her absence. I brought Beatrice into the barn that night. Gave her dry straw, checked her leg. Nothing broken. Just a strain, maybe. But something in her eyes. She hated being sidelined. Hated not being useful. That's something I hadn't expected, to see pride in a goat. But it was there, plain as daylight. I kept her close for a few days, let her rest. Sam, meanwhile, worked solo. He was brilliant as ever, but I could tell he was thrown off. He checked over his shoulder more often. Took longer paths, as if saving space for someone who wasn't there. By the following week, Beatrice was back on her feet. Not 100%, but close. I let her follow at her own pace. She didn't push. She knew her limits. And Sam adjusted again, slowed a touch, looped tighter, made room. Together, they found a new rhythm. Winter came in sharp. A week into December, we had a freeze that turned the hills silver. The sheep huddled close, and I cut back the range, keeping the herd on the mid-pasture where they could find grass through the frost. That's when something else began to change. I started relying on the two of them not just for herding, but for management. Sam had always had an eye for which ewes were limping, which lambs weren't nursing. But Beatrice, she began showing signs of her own awareness. I'd see her hover near a ewe who'd strayed too far, or nudge a young one away from a broken fence post. Once, I caught her standing like a sentry between the flock and a pair of foxes nosing the hedgerow. She didn't panic, didn't charge, just stood tall, broadside, head up. They slunk away. One night, after a long day tending to a sick ram, I sat in the barn and watched the two of them lying side by side. Sam's head was resting on his paws, eyes half-lidded. Beatrice lay with her legs tucked under, breathing slow, the rise and fall of her chest matched to his. There was no affection in the usual sense, no nuzzling or licking, but there was ease. Peace. By January, they were inseparable. I don't mean that in a fanciful way. If Sam went to the creek, Beatrice went too. If I called one, the other followed. And the sheep, they followed both. It was like having two lieutenants. One by instinct, the other by observation. And somehow, together, they made something whole. I started thinking about legacy then. Not mine, though I knew my years were winding down, but theirs. Beatrice wouldn't last forever. She was getting older, slower. And Sam had a decade on him. Maybe more. I wasn't sure what would happen when one went without the other. Then came February. It snowed heavy that year. Crusted deep and hard overnight. I woke one morning to find drifts packed up against the north barn. The sheep were restless, some of them stranded against the fence line. I called for Sam. He came right away, tail high, ready to work. I opened the gate. Beatrice was there, but she hesitated. She was limping again, worse than before. I reached for her, but she pulled away. Not panicked, just firm. She didn't want help. She wanted to work. I sighed, cursed softly, and stepped aside. It took us twice as long that day, but we got the flock in. Sam worked harder than I'd seen in months. He wasn't as fast as he used to be, but he was precise. Methodical. Beatrice took a different approach. She stuck to the center of the herd, moving slowly, like a mobile boundary. The sheep responded to her like they always did, no panic, no noise, just direction. At one point, I slipped in the snow, cracked my knee on a rock. Not bad, but enough to drop me. Before I could get up, Beatrice was beside me. She didn't make a sound. Just stood there, staring down at me like I was the one who needed shepherding. I laughed. A deep, tired laugh. And for the first time in weeks, I let her nudge me. Just a little. Just enough. That night, I gave them both extra oats. Sam licked my hand. Beatrice didn't. But she looked at me in that way of hers, eyes sharp, thoughtful. I swear, if she could talk, she would have said, "I told you I could do it." By March, her limp was permanent. She still walked. Still worked when she could. But she spent more time resting, watching from a distance. Sam adjusted again, took the lead more, checked in more. And the sheep, they still obeyed her, even from the sidelines. It was then I realized something else. Beatrice didn't need to be in the thick of it anymore. Her presence was enough. Her history. The flock knew her, trusted her. She had become part of the landscape, part of the order. And Sam, who'd never trusted another dog the way he worked with her, he seemed calmer beside her. Grounded. They say animals don't feel things the way we do. That they don't form bonds. Maybe that's true for some. But not for these two. One morning, just before lambing season, I sat on the hill and watched them. Sam was nudging the flock gently down the slope. Beatrice stood at the crest, still as stone, wind lifting her coat. Sam passed her on the way back, and without a word, without a bark, he stopped. Just for a second, they looked at each other. Then moved on. It wasn't a farewell, not yet, but it was something close. I knew what was coming. Spring came late that year, like a guest reluctant to show up after a long silence. When it finally arrived, it brought with it soft rain and green shoots pushing up through the thawed soil. The ewes were heavy with lambs, and the fields, even with the mud and wind, began to come alive again. Beatrice's limp had worsened. She didn't come to the gate in the mornings anymore. She stayed near the barn, mostly, just beyond it, in the corner of the paddock where she could still see the pasture. I'd taken to giving her extra feed, soft hay, and laying fresh bedding under the oak tree she liked best. She never complained. That wasn't her way. She just watched. Sam, though, he noticed everything. He still came to the gate, still worked the flock like clockwork, but he always circled back before the job was done. Always checked on her. He'd trot over, paws near her shoulder, maybe nose her gently if she was lying down. Then he'd be off again. Lambing that season was tough. We lost 2, and 1 ewe came down with mastitis. I was out in the fields more than usual, sleeping little, eating less. The older I got, the harder it became to manage the long nights. But Sam carried the weight, and somehow, Beatrice did too, from her place at the edge of the field. She'd lift her head whenever we passed. A little nod, that was all, and it kept me going. One morning in late April, I came out just after sunrise. I had a new lamb that needed bottle feeding, and my back was sore from the day before. Sam was already by the gate, tail still, eyes on the barn. He didn't move to greet me like he normally would. Just waited, quiet. I followed his gaze. Beatrice was lying near the oak, like usual. But this time, she didn't lift her head. I knew. I didn't run, didn't call out. I just walked over, slow and steady, like approaching a skittish ewe. But there was no movement. No breath. Her eyes were closed, legs tucked neatly under, just the way she always slept. Only this time, she wasn't sleeping. I knelt beside her, put a hand to her side. Cold, still. I don't know how long I stayed there. The birds had started singing, the sky pale with sun, but I didn't move. Sam came up beside me eventually, sat down without a sound. He didn't sniff or paw. He just looked. For a long time. Then he laid down beside her. They say animals don't grieve. I don't know about that. But that morning, I saw something in Sam that told me he knew. Not just that she was gone, but that it mattered. We buried Beatrice under the oak tree. Just me and Sam. No ceremony. No words. I laid her on a fresh bed of straw before covering her over, and Sam sat beside the spot until the sun was high. I've buried a lot of animals over the years. You don't run a farm without loss. But this one was different. I didn't cry, not then, but I felt it, heavy in my chest. Like something had shifted in the bones of the place. The next few days were quiet. Sam worked, as always, but without the same lightness. He moved slower, checked the barn more often. I think he was looking for her. Or maybe for what she'd given him, partnership. Purpose. And I missed her too. Not just the help she'd been, but her presence. The way she listened, the way she watched, the space she held without ever asking for more. Summer came, hot and bright. The lambs grew quickly. The flock was strong. And Sam, bit by bit, found his rhythm again. But he was never quite the same. One afternoon in July, I was fixing a section of fence up near the old stone wall. Sam had been patrolling the edge of the field, keeping the sheep away from a patch of thistle. I whistled for him, and he came trotting up, but halfway, he stopped. He turned, looked back toward the oak tree, and sat down. Didn't move, just sat there, watching the spot where Beatrice had always stood. I didn't call him again. I let him sit. After a while, he came over, nuzzled my hand, and we finished the fence. Life kept going, as it always does. Seasons rolled forward. The flock changed. New lambs, new challenges. Sam aged, too. His muzzle went gray. His steps grew stiff. But he worked, year after year, until he no longer could. The last time we walked the pasture together, it was autumn again. A cool wind was pushing through the valley, and the leaves were starting to fall. Sam walked slowly now, stopping every few feet, but his eyes were still bright. Still sharp. We reached the oak tree. I sat down on the rock nearby. He lay at my feet, chest rising and falling. I looked out over the fields, green and golden, stretched to the horizon, and thought about all the days we'd spent out there. All the moments shared without words. A goat and a dog. A shepherd and his animals. It's funny, you spend a lifetime thinking you know how things should be. You train your dogs. You build your fences. You plant your fields in the way your father did, and his father before him. But sometimes, something unexpected happens. A goat arrives. And instead of chewing fence posts or making trouble, she teaches a dog how to share the load. Teaches a man how to see beyond what's expected. How to listen. How to trust. Beatrice did that. She never asked for anything. Never made a sound that wasn't necessary. But she gave us something no one else could. She gave us each other. And in that quiet, enduring way, she reminded me that the best partnerships don't always come from training or bloodlines or plans. Sometimes, they come from simply standing side by side, day after day, in the wind and rain, doing the work without complaint. That's the kind of loyalty that can't be taught. It can only be lived. And remembered. So now, when the younger farmers ask me what the secret is to a good working dog, or how to keep a flock calm through a storm, I smile. I tell them what they expect to hear: patience, consistency, good breeding. But in my mind, I'm always thinking of a goat with wise eyes and a quiet presence. Of a dog who made space beside him for something different. And of a farm made better not by force, but by the quiet grace of unexpected friendship. That's the real secret, and I carry it with me, still. Always.